Beautiful, Robert. Thank you for that great music. Welcome, everyone, to our Temple of Light service. So great to see you all. A time that we can be together and deep and sound worship and being at a balance point together. We look forward to our time with Larry and Maureen leading it. And before we do, let's still our hearts and minds and come together in our collective radiation. So however way you're good with sharing radiation, let's take a moment. As our hearts beat together soundly, sensing something coming forth, sensing something be receiving through all of us. Let's just wait until our substance settles and let it settle within each of us. And as we look forward to our time, opening the way in our hearts and minds to hear Larry and Maureen speak the word of God, of Father God and Mother God. Let our time be full. And Maureen will begin. Maureen?
A warm greeting this morning, this afternoon, or this evening. Last Sunday on the Tone of Life gathering, Christina Pivarnik, Alan Geisinger, and Andrew Shire each shared with us their experience with horses. They spoke from their hearts of their love for these beautiful horse beings, and in turn, the horses' responses of devotion, love, and trust. Christina read a poem about a particular horse, and I just learned this morning that it's called The Painted Horse of the Wind. There was a line in that poem referring to this horse, the essence of which I've carried in my thoughts and in my heart all this week. He came not with noise, but with presence. He came not with noise, but with presence. A short while ago, I watched on Netflix an interview with Jane Goodall entitled Famous Last Words. Maybe some or most of you have probably seen it. Here was a woman who came not with noise, but with the power of presence. Here was a light burning brightly on earth. Presence. Jane apparently requested that this interview not be made available until after she had died. And I would like to read her recorded very last words, slightly edited for brevity. In the place where I am now, I look back over my life. I look back at the world I've left behind. What message do I want to leave? I want to make sure that you all understand that each and every one of you has a role to play. You may not know it, you may not find it, but your life matters, and you are here for a reason. And I just hope that reason will become apparent as you live through your life. I want you to know that whether or not you find that role that you're supposed to play, your life does matter. And that every single day you live, you make a difference in the world. And you get to choose the difference that you make. If you want to save the planet for the future generations, your grandchildren, their grandchildren, then think about the actions you take each day. Because multiplied a billion times, even small actions will make for great change. I just hope that you understand that this life on planet Earth isn't the end. I believe, and now I know, that there is life beyond death. That consciousness survives. I can't tell you from where I am secrets that are not mine to share. I can't tell you what you will find when you leave planet Earth. But I want you to think about the fact that we are part, when we're on planet Earth, we are part of Mother Nature. We depend on Mother Nature for clean air, for water, for food, for clothing, for everything. You have it in your power to make a difference. Don't give up. There is a future for you. Do your best while you're still on this beautiful planet Earth that I look down upon from where I am now. May God bless you all. The power of presence, of divine presence, emanating through one person is immense. And the power of presence radiating through a collective body of people transforms this planet. As Jane spoke these heartfelt words, my own heart and mind leaped and were filled with words from Revelation. a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written on their foreheads. We know that number 12 times 12 times 1,000, or just plain 12, relates somehow to that collective body of people ordained out of every nation, participating as one in the Lord's control pattern for this planet. Some in this collective body are conscious of what is happening, and some are not as conscious, but all are participating in it anyway, as determined by the quality of their living. We may not know their names in the human sense, but our Father's name is written on their foreheads. We recognize each other. That collective body is in place. At the present time, there seems to be murderous hatred and rage erupting all over this planet. Horrific things are happening. I would like to read to you an excerpt from an article entitled "Ready for the Apocalypse" from The Week magazine. As anxiety rises about the state of the world, the ranks of preppers are growing. What exactly is a prepper? It's anyone who anticipates a calamity resulting in some degree of social collapse and makes plans or prepares to survive independently. A prepper is someone who could survive independently for 30 days. How many preppers are there? More than 20 million. United States preppers spent $11 billion on gear in 2023, according to a Finder.com survey, and the market is still expanding. As ordinary preppers stock up on freeze-dried meals and first aid kits, their billionaire counterparts are making plans to ride out the apocalypse in luxury. So say builders of shelters for clients who aim to be ready when, in prepper parlance, SHTF, the hits the fan. Bunkers are the new status symbol. Shelters include gyms, pools, libraries, and shooting ranges. Atlas survival shelters said a high-end buying frenzy erupted beginning in 2023 when it was reported that Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg's new Hawaii compound included a 5,000 square foot bunker. Now that spread pales next to a project being built in the upper Midwest by Virginia-based firm SAFE, S-A-F-E. It's a fortress surrounded by a 30-foot moat skimmed with a flammable liquid that can transform into a ring of fire. It also has water cannons that can take down helicopters. California-based Vivos Group is leasing space in what it calls the world's largest survival shelter community, 575 empty ex-Army concrete bunkers on South Dakota grasslands. In Kansas, sits the survival condo, a former missile silo converted into a 15-story survival habitat. There is a desperation to survive in the same human nature, culture, behaviors, and hard-heartedness that prevails on Earth today. Many are fearful, as before our eyes, the old heaven and the old earth are disintegrating and dying. In that individual and collective passing away, we see at the same time the wonder that is present, the quiet evidence everywhere of a new and divine identity rising. Yes, fear is present, and we know that perfect love casts out fear. But what exactly does that mean? What is perfect fear? What is our experience? To me, it's not definable because it's not a concept. We know it when we abide in the place of stillness, where the noise can't come in, where there's a protective shield. I am here in the midst of radiating presence. We hold our minds and our hearts steady, not to be blown away by emotional minor winds or even emotional major storms that come into the environment, that come into circumstances that come our way. Our hearts are wide open only to the release of love current, love that not only casts out fear, but love transmutes, transforms, love current that builds anew, constructs in visible form this glorious new state. Martin Cecil, as we all know, shared these words with us in 1970, but they could have been spoken yesterday. Through your own experience, you are aware of a change of consciousness. The change that has taken place in your consciousness is unique to each one, but it is part of the process of the experience of movement into what we have called a seven-dimensional world, the new state. For it is in this that existence is alone possible. No more in this three-dimensional state. It is only a temporary thing anyway. That it was man. That is what man was warned about it, that it was only a temporary thing, a temporary obscuring of vision, out of which there would be emergence in due course. There need have been none of this misery that has occurred in the world if the mind hadn't forgotten that it couldn't see. Fantastic? Maybe to the human mind. But fortunately, the fantasies of the human mind don't control. And so it goes. And so we go one way or another, up or down. And so it is true of everybody else without exception. We we understand what is underway on this planet. Yes, a restoration to vision and to life. And in this undertaking, for which we incarnated, our hearts and our minds are allowed to be consistently purified, because we lay not up for ourselves treasures upon earth where moth and rust doth corrupt. What are these earthly treasures? Well, we would say that perhaps that earthly treasures refer to heart attachments to many things, including the familiar one, which is a lust and a focus on the accumulation of material goods. But there are other kinds of earthly treasures. One is a heart attachment, a passionate cachet of opinions as to who or what is good or who or what is bad. I hate that politician. I love that politician. A cachet, passionate cachet of opinions about this or that. Another earthly treasure might even include a deep heart attachment and obsession for spiritual growth. That sounds like a good one. And often, yes, it is a good first step. But you know what? It's still an earthly treasure. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. What is that one? Well, we could name some things. We could say virtue, patience, thankfulness, forgiveness. We could name many others. But I'd like to say that those are treasures, yes, but they're minor treasures. They're almost beautiful jewels and effects of the real treasure. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Our deepest passion, our deepest love, our heart's only treasure is to stand with the Lord of love, the Lord of truth, and the Lord of life on Mount Zion. That presence on Mount Zion is the greater fact that is underway. That is the magnificent fact that is underway. And as this purification continues to take place in our hearts, we see the world differently, and the world changes. We see the glory that is happening, not just the volcanic horror. One significant world change took place this past week, between Pope Leo XIV and King Charles. How beautiful and sacred was their service together in the Sistine Chapel, a healing of a 500-year-old rift, a melt of Catholic and Protestant hatred. I wrote down some of their joint prayer words. In Christ, all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible. You are worthy, our Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things. The power of presence. At the end of their visit together, apparently they exchanged orchids. The orchid is a plant known for its resilience in difficult environments. They exchanged these orchids as a sign of their mutual commitment to the care of creation. As most of you may not be aware, my house for many years has always had orchids in it, always. I am an orchid lover. So I was delighted to hear of this exchange. Who knows? I like to think that maybe the radiation from my orchids has helped to open and melt a few hearts in the commitment to the care of creation. I would like to conclude with a short quote from a great man who once walked this earth in the United States, Abraham Lincoln. I want it said of me by those who knew me best that I always plucked a thistle and planted a flower where I thought a flower would grow. So over to you, Larry, my dear friend, my trustworthy and wonderfully much loved friend.
Thank you, Maureen. Greetings, everyone. It's good to be with you. My starting point is that all is well. All is eternally well. As Maureen mentioned, there are people scurrying around with survivalist gear and building bunkers if they can afford it and so on. But anything that is based on manipulating form and where there is little vision, nothing of consequence will happen. People are sensing change coming, and it's interpreted or misinterpreted in many ways. But for us, the answer is not going laterally, but rising up vertically, vibrationally creating an arc, as has been mentioned. And I've been giving thought to the vastness of heaven that one begins to see as consciousness ascends, and how even things that seem to be contradictory from a lower level of understanding make perfect sense when there is adequate elevation and seen from a right perspective. For example, Joyce and I traveled to Atlanta recently, which was great, spending time with friends and very creative, useful time. And at one point, we went up to the Blue Ridge Mountains to visit Maureen and her husband Gary in their beautiful home. And I had the experience that I'm sure is familiar to many of you. I hadn't seen Maureen in a long time, decades. But yet, when we got together, we knew each other instantly as if no time had passed. Well, there are two ways to look at that. There is the outer physical way that, yes, we haven't seen each other a long time, but at another level, we're both in the place of eternal friendship. Friendship doesn't need to be made because of common experiences or beliefs and all of that stuff that is what usually people look for. Friendship exists if we're in the place of oneness, transcending all of the earthly stuff because we're in the same place. We love each other. We love the Lord. We're one. It's easy. Another example, on our trip, uh, we got on an airplane, sat down in the seats, and 3 hours later, got up from that seat, and we were no longer in Colorado, but Georgia. Did we go anywhere? Oh, yes, you could look at it from an earthly viewpoint. I looked out the window of the plane and saw the land passing underneath us, and we could measure it as 1,500 miles or so. Sure. But from another point of view, speaking personally, I didn't go anywhere. Circumstances around me changed. That's all, as they always do, because I'm always at the center of my world, just as each of you are at the center of your world. Things change all around us, even our own physical bodies age and change, but we're always at that central place. So, two ways of looking at things, but they make perfect sense. It's like having binoculars where you can change the focus on the lens. You can look at something far away like the moon and move that little wheel that changes the focus and look at a bird and a tree across the street. We can change our focus. We can speak in a certain way at a gathering like this and then narrow the focus when we're at a book club, and things that we say here that are fitting may not fit there. But it shows the flexibility of consciousness. If there is an ascension so that there is a vertical component, there's a lot of space. We aren't living in a very flat, three-dimensional world. Another example that's troubled people is a story in Genesis about creation. It says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So, people look at God as being this singular entity, whatever God is. Okay, I get that. That can make sense. And did all these wonderful magical things. But then just a few verses later, it said, let us make man in our image and likeness. So that's plural. And it's not even saying they or them, but us, all of us. So which is it? Is God one entity or many entities? Well, it's confusing from an earthly viewpoint, but from a heavenly viewpoint, it makes perfect sense because in the creation, there were beings of light, innumerable beings of light, which I'm sure included all of us, that had godlike powers and abilities that created this wonderful complex world that we find ourselves in. But they were of one voice, singing one song, the song of creation. So separate, yet one, could be looked at either way, just as my hand has different fingers. The pinky and thumb are quite different. But I could also look at it as being one hand, capable of a particular action as needed. So we have this great flexibility of consciousness. Wonderful to see that. And to have the space to understand things in a way that most people don't. Now, along the way, mankind deviated from the tone of life, from heeding the call of love, not with bad intentions, but to just tweak things a little bit, just improve them according to what I'd like to see happen, which I think might be an improvement. And outside of the control of love, the abilities and powers that were invested in all of us were taken away because we were no longer trustworthy. We could misuse these powers, and that happened. There were many distorted forms brought into the earth. Many changes took place, and there was a descending cycle for mankind. And we find ourselves in the world as it is with these flesh bodies, which are not the bodies that were originally created for divine beings to enter the world. But here we are. And life never wastes time complaining about what isn't. It accepts things the way they are and works creatively with them. There have been many attempts down through the millennia to allow man to be restored to a place of trustworthiness where the voltage and intensity of divine being could be accommodated, and with it, different abilities that the human mind could hardly imagine in its present state. But every time that an attempt was made, human nature came along also. There's that quote from the book of Job about the sons of God presenting themselves before the Lord, but, to paraphrase, human nature separated from divine purpose came also. And so the great ones who came and the opportunities that were offered to mankind fell by the wayside because what was pure and beautiful and clear was distorted and misused, and the attempts never went on to restore mankind to its proper state. As we know, more than 90 years ago, Uranda initiated a new attempt to allow mankind to come back to divine identity, and followed up by Martin Exeter, something clear and powerful and wonderful was offered to mankind. Not unsurprisingly, human nature came along too. And as we know, at some point, things deviated a little bit from the clear tone of life. And there was a disruption. One could say, shouldn't have been a surprise because that's the way it's been throughout history. There were bumps in the road. People lost their way. Forms fell apart. People were thrust out from their surroundings. Many people were hurt, left without much in the way of financial resources. But something was maintained. The generation of substance begun by Uranda and followed through by many people has continued on, and we're evidence of it today. Some of us may have wandered in the wilderness for a while. Some of our friends may have lost their way and can't find their way back. But for the first time in more than 10,000 years, something is being followed through of stability and a clear tone that gives an unprecedented opportunity for mankind to be restored to divine function. And when we prove over time that we are trustworthy and that nothing could compromise our integrity, we might find that many gifts and abilities are restored, and that transformation and transmutation may occur in us and in the world around us. Maureen mentioned presence. There need to be those on earth who maintain divine presence all the time, even when no one's looking, even in our most private moments, seemingly doing trivial things, because everything we do in our true presence sends out vibratory chords like the sounding of a trumpet into the consciousness of mankind. There has to be something present for others to respond to, that they may be uplifted, that their response may lead them to higher understanding. When that happens, it's wonderful. We are seeing it all around us. People are rising up in consciousness and beginning to see things from a whole different level, beginning to remember who they are. One example that comes to mind is a story I read by a gentleman who described why he left the church. He'd brought up in an evangelical Christian household, and he was passionate about living this life according to the beliefs that he'd been told. He went on to seminary school. He started his own family. He became a minister and was continuing this life. But then a strange thing happened to him. He felt that there was something wrong with his life. He felt a little bit of a phony. And this is the way it begins, isn't it? We feel something first in our hearts. And then what do we do with it? The usual tendency when we're doing something that we know is wrong, no matter what it is, because at some level we know it's wrong, is for the mind to justify the actions, to rationalize, why I hate this person, why I did this awful thing, even killing people, going to wars, doing all sorts of things. The human experience is very good at justifying and rationalizing, and that takes a lot of mental energy to do that. When something is right and true and we act on it, it's simple, and there's a generation of the light of understanding. We begin to see things. So this fellow didn't rationalize his experience away and continue his ministry. He started to look at it and wonder why. And he was behind the scenes. He began to see how the church manipulated people to come to services, to donate money and do different things. And he felt there was something not quite right about that. As he thought about it more, he realized how the church used shame and guilt to get what they wanted. And this made him feel very uneasy because he didn't like that, didn't feel it was the right thing for him. What finally did it for him was, as he began to meditate about the teachings of the church, he thought about heaven and hell as he knew it. And he said to himself, This notion of hell just doesn't make any sense. How could a God who is love create a place where people are tortured and hurt continually? He's a father. He loves his own children, and he thinks, as a loving father, no matter what my children have done, how they've misbehaved, I still love them. I want to help them see more clearly what a right and safe behavior is. I want to guide them. I don't want to hurt them. I would never send them to a place like this imagined hell. And he decided, I just can't do this anymore. So he found a new career and decided he would live life in a loving way and let go of a lot of this other stuff. He was awakening to the truth of himself. He was beginning to see things in a new light. He was beginning to ascend in consciousness. And I rejoice in that. I'm sure there are many, many people throughout the world, each in their own way and coming from their own culture and background and tradition and so on, who are beginning to pay heed to that feeling that they have that they're not doing the right thing and beginning to find their way to be honest and true and righteous in their own way. Now, as people ascend in consciousness, they begin to see more and more clearly the design of life and why the world is the way it is. No matter where we're coming from, as there's an approach to the central way, the language becomes increasingly familiar because we're seeing the same thing. So along the way, a person might see it one way or another based on their background, but as there is ascension up the mountainside, we find that even the words become closer. Having said that, I'd like to read you something that was sent to me by a person who, in her own way, has come to see the truth quite clearly without the training that most of us have had. I rejoice in her vision because her words ring true to me. There's resonance with them. So I've, like Maureen, I've edited her words slightly to fit in with our consideration. This is from someone named Carrie Kay, and I have no idea who this woman is or what her background is. But she sees something. Here's what she said. There are souls walking this earth who have always known themselves to be different. Not because something is wrong with them, but because they came holding a frequency the world is only just beginning to recognize. We, the light bearers, do not need to be convinced of the sacred. It sings inside of us as a living memory, one we might not be able to name until the moment we stand in its presence and our whole body remembers. This lifetime marks the culmination of a massive ascension cycle. We remember who we are and why we came. Our mission is not simply to remember in the quiet safety of our own being, but to remember in the midst of the forgetting, to stand before those still asleep and hold truth so steadily that it ripples through the fabric of reality itself. In the presence of our remembrance, others are stirred. Even if only faintly at first, as though a blurry light appears at the edge of vision and something ancient begins to whisper home. And so when we, the light bearers, began to appear, daring to question what was accepted and daring to remember what was forgotten, the forgetting ones resisted with outrage, with scorn, with condemnation. We carried a memory from home, a distant echo that began to dismantle the lie the moment it brushed against illusion. Yet every act of resistance only revealed their desperation, like building bunkers. And every blow against the light became another crack in the prison they were trying so hard to defend. The light bearers of this age, walking in human form, came not to be superior, but to stand as catalysts. Our very presence is an invitation. Our steady remembrance creates a resonance that makes it possible for others to remember too. The call to return home cannot be imposed, but the light workers make home visible again simply by embodying the frequency of home and rippling it into the collective field. The light bearers came because we remember the magnificence of humanity, even when humanity forgot itself. Light workers are walking each other home, shoulder to shoulder, reminding and uplifting one another as much as they remind the world. This is not the work of a single soul. It is the mission of many. And together we hold the doorway of remembrance wide open. We understand what she's saying. Even her words might sound a lot like ours, because she has, in her own way, ascended in consciousness, as many people are these days, beginning to see with new eyes, with clarity of vision and purpose. Jane Goodall, as was mentioned, had a feeling that there was a purpose to her life, and nothing would detract her from that purpose. Even in the beginning, being a woman in Africa, relatively alone, not having the kind of traditional training, she was determined to exemplify caring for our planet, caring for a particular kind of animal species in a most beautiful way. Same is true for all of us, each in our own way. We were born for a purpose. There's a mission that we were given. The Lord isn't interested in micromanaging our lives. That's up to us to be creative, to make use of what is at hand, what's available, and to demonstrate what it is to be a divine man or woman in the center of our worlds, using what's available to uplift that circumstance, and thereby letting a current be released into the world and beyond the world that there is a reason for man to be on this planet. And so it is our sacred joy to continue the generation of substance that Yolanda began, was carried through by so many others, past the bumps in the road to where we are now, letting this expand in us and in the consciousness of humanity, that there might be significant changes in the human condition, that there might be transformation, from this old earth into a new earth. That is the role we've come to play individually and together. Great to share this with all of you. And if others wish to contribute to our consideration, please do so.
Larry and Maureen, it is certainly a sacred joy to have shared this magnificent hour, not only with the both of you providing a focus, but with all of us collectively, because we do stand in this precious sacred ground in the power of presence. Magnificent presence with a capital P. Very, very beautiful. Many things to consider here, but really it's simply knowing the truth of the words and the spirit and the great joy that we do know what we do know, and that we maintain that consistently in ourselves, in our private moments, and with all of us together collectively. So deepest thanks to you both for your focus.
Well, it is an absolute delight to be together and to be with you, Maureen and Larry, in this very fine generation, this fine vibration. I was noticing it particularly was while Steve was opening, and we had that lengthy, quiet period together where the sounds of the sacred could be heard so clearly in that silence. And the presence of the Lord God, which is a collective formation, was vividly present in those quiet moments. But the interesting thing is that as you spoke, that wonderful stillness and silence was not disturbed at all. But what was said and shared emerged clearly out of that silence, while the beauty of the underlying sacred tones in the silence remained so rich and clear. The content of what has been shared, so many phrases. I think I maybe ticked off about 30 phrases or words that had arisen in my consciousness just in the last few days as points of specific awareness and meditation. And I was thinking that in the book of Genesis, there are some words that go, and Cain went out from the presence of the Lord. Very sad words. And yet what rings so clearly through what we share with you this morning is that Cain, this material body containing and housing spiritual consciousness, has come into the presence of the Lord. There is a returning of this brother, this material brother, into the presence of the Lord, and we exemplify that. The spiritual one never went out from the presence of the Lord, always been there. But here we can represent the fact that Cain, our human facilities, have come back into the presence of the Lord, and there's a oneness known. And so the Lord God, through a collective body, walks the earth again. And what you've outlined here, particularly Larry, of the progression of things from the fall to this point, in our experience, particularly with Yolanda and Martin, is very beautiful. And I feel personally washed new by the word of the Spirit, the word of truth that we've shared this morning. Thank you.
Indeed. I want to thank you both so much too. I feel your words resonate with all of us here in a very simple, down-to-earth way, something that we can all understand and project into our worlds and with great clarity. And all I can think of is the feeling part that comes to me, skipping upon the mountains, leaping upon the hills, just to feel the enthusiasm of what we're doing together in all humility and gracefulness. But I know in my own living, when I speak these words, the ones that you've used already, just like David was saying, you are using words that have come forth from me in this day in different situations. And that's the synchronicity of what we all share. We have our own experiences so deliberately articulated by the Lord's hand because of our ongoing forever love for Him and the eternal friendships that we know with one another, regardless of the separations that have come in the years gone by. So it is so beautiful to share this with both of you, all of you. And thank you for all the words that have come forth. It is the most gracious time to be together and precious.
Maureen and Larry, and all those who have spoken. I am noting that each physical body on this screen has a beating heart. And my experience of this time together is a greater beating heart that has beat forever, but is coming to particular focus with us. We keep this greater heart beating, the collective heart of God. That is the sound and the vibration on the earth that makes the difference. That is a sound that brings in all the wonderful words that have been spoken this morning, and all the people all over the earth somewhere know that vibration and that sound. But what a pleasure to feel it so completely this morning. What wonderful stories you told to make a web of encompassment and love of all good things. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura, and everyone else. Our hour's about up. Maureen, do you have any words you'd like to share with us?
Well, I would just say very simply that the words that come to mind in this very moment is, I come that they might have life and they might have it more abundantly. And I say that to first the they of this flesh and then the larger collective body on out. And standing in the place of the presence of being, we can all say that. I come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. And how beautiful was this letter that you wrote, that you didn't write, you read, Larry. It was just another beautiful example of what is rising and the life that is coming forward all over this planet through many, many of us. So thank you, each one who spoke and who was quiet, because together we are separate, but we are one. So thank you.
If I could ask your indulgence for a moment, seeing June on my screen, there's a story that I feel compelled to share. I mentioned the bumps in the road where things got a little out of whack for a while. This was true with the Whole Health Institute, of which I was president. Very useful organization that offered outreach into the health field, and we put on a Human Unity conference and had seminars and did a lot of good things. But human nature came into our board at one point, and to my surprise, many members of our board at one point had formed a conspiracy. It's all very childish, especially looking back on it now. And they had decided that they wanted to take the organization in a different direction. And it felt really off tone to me. And I told them that at this board meeting, that I just couldn't go along with it. It didn't feel right. But they were determined. They had a plan. The only one who stood with me in agreement was Joe Holton, a wonderful man with a big heart who knew who he was. But there was nothing we could do about it. So at this meeting, they voted Joe and me off the board and voted one of themselves to become the new president of the Whole Health Institute. But it wasn't in the flow of life any longer. And the organization essentially dissolved within about 2 months. And I thought of not only honoring Joe by telling this story, June, but how one could consider the analogy of a sailboat. When the wind is blowing and the sails are full, the boat is moving along very easily. But as soon as the wind stops and the sails are flat, the boat is no longer moving. It is that way with us. When we're in the flow of life, there's a wind behind us helping move us along. But if we step out of that flow and that breeze isn't there behind us anymore, we're slogging along in the human nature world. And so we experienced this bump in the road. An opportunity was lost. A form, and that's all any organization is a form, was gone. But new forms can be built, because the form isn't the important thing. It's the spirit, the wind that fills the sails. That's the important thing. And now we have the Temple of Light, like today, and other forms, attunement groups and so on, which is wonderful, because spirit is very flexible and adaptable and can build new forms that fit the circumstance. So here we are in this day where many cycles of ascension are coming to a certain point, and how wonderful to be a part of that with all of you, and to be conscious of what's happening, to participate with it, to be one with this wind of spirit, because that's who we are. I'll turn it back to you, Steve, to let us wrap things up.
Wonderful, Larry. And as Dr. Bill Bain would say, may the wind be behind our back,
Yes.
because we're in the right direction. And as we've shared in the right direction tonight, there's a voltage, you can say we've all shared it. And Larry was saying, as that voltage increases, then there's greater capacity. Robert, you're sharing the screen. There's greater capacity for transformation and transmutation. So Larry, I'm glad you spent some extra moments there in that respect. And sometimes with that voltage, there is some discomfort. As we raise to another level, we may feel a little unsteady, but as we continue in that way, voltage increases and our capacities become greater for our influence. And as Larry was speaking, Maureen, the words of we've heard about ET phoning home. Our call is come home, come home. That's our call. Wonderful to be together in this oneness. Robert, now you can share your screen and we'll finish our time. Our next service will be in November, 23rd with Stortberger.
Well, I do apologize. The Zoom that I'm working on is not responding to what I'm asking it to do. So I look forward to seeing all of you next month. Bye-bye.
I've got an idea.
Yeah.
How about if we have the silence again at the end, and think about all those ones who are stirred because there are those who are home, and just unfold that drawing forth that is in motion as we are in that heaven that Maureen, you were talking about, in that gracious place. So how about a little beginning and end?